My name is, as was mentioned, Scott Woods. Before we get into the meat of this, what I would like you to do is on that little piece of paper that you got, there's a question, the first question on there, right? Someone want to read that out loud for me real quick? Thank you, whoever that was. And so what I want you to do in your mind, or you can write it down, is to answer that question, because I want you to think about that now, and then I want you to think about that at the end before we break out and do further discussion, all right? So the first thing I should probably tell you is that who I am. My focus is on writing. I do lots of things, but mostly I'm known as a writer. I write for very public platforms, national and local. My subjects are generally about culture, and that's a pretty broad topic, right? But I like to talk about race a lot. I like to talk about art a lot, and I talk about all the arts. And so that's kind of what I do. What I'm known for is being critical. And so, like, this is the resume, right? This is a version of the resume. And out of all the things on here, probably the thing that's going to relate most today is that award I got for best essay writing, because that writing is very special to me. I've published 2 books of poetry. Those are also very special children. I've written a book of essays about Prince, also a very special child. But it's that writing that I do for newspapers and magazines that really is really why I'm here today, if we're honest, okay? Because I'm naturally several things. I'm naturally very bonded with communities. I lean into groups and communities. I'm naturally creative. I love to write. I occasionally paint, do music, whatever. Don't tell nobody. But then I'm also naturally critical. And I think most of us are, but like I have really honed that. I've leaned into that. And we'll talk about kind of what that means and what that looks like. But that's the thing about me that's probably going to be most pertinent today. So I want to talk about how many definitions of critical there are. There's so many. You have so many options. You should have already chosen one of them. And if you look at this, you see it's a ridiculous list. This one word has a ridiculous list of definitions, right? Expressing adverse and disapproving comments, expressing analysis, merits, and the faults of work of literature, music, or art, incorporating detailed scholarly analysis, involving objective analysis and evaluation of an issue to form a judgment, having the potential to become disastrous at the point of crisis, extremely ill and at risk of death, having a decisive or crucial importance in the success, failure, or existence of something. And that's before we get to the 2 mathematic ones, which who cares? It turns out you didn't need them, right? So really, I only really want to talk about 2 of these definitions today. Those are the ones that will be important today. The first one that I want to talk about is going to be involving the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment, right? So that's basically what we all basically consider criticism. I saw a thing, I heard a thing, I listened to a thing, here's my opinion, right? Second one we're going to be focusing on today is having the potential to become disastrous at a point of crisis. That's what I'm always writing about, okay? And I'm going to put those up real quick just so you can kind of see what we're dealing with. Because I don't think anybody would disagree, regardless of your political, social, religious, personal bent, we are living in a critical time. And I know every time says it's a critical time. But I think that we can all agree that this time feels a little different, a little more critical than usual, right? A little more divisive, a little more combative, a little more dumb. And so the thing that I want to draw out is that to avoid the second thing, we have to do more of the first thing. To avoid the outcomes and the results of the critical time, we have to indeed become more critical. But we have to do that in certain ways. Not every criticism is productive. We want a productive criticism, do we not? Otherwise, we're just on Twitter, right? We're just on Twitter. So to avoid the critical time destroying everything, we have to become more critical. We have to lean into the will to be critical, right? So conflict avoidance is off the menu in 2022, right? We have to, with the kind of issues that we're dealing with, we cannot afford to be scared. That's really what it boils down to, right? It's kind of a fear. We don't want to get into the conflict, you know, and we mask that in so many ways, but ultimately it's fear. And I understand it. I'm scared right now, right? But we have to step out of that and into a desire for criticism. We have to thirst for criticism, good criticism, right criticism, productive criticism, right? So let's talk about this right kind of critical. Because the kind of criticism that I'm referring to is called, I call it, and other people too, but it's the work, right? Is whatever the work is. If there's an issue, there is some work that must happen around the issue, right? So I am constantly talking about white supremacy, racism, these kinds of things. Those are the things, you know, that I'm talking about, I'm writing about, I'm, you know, creating events to, you know, combat, whatever. All of that is the work, right? Versus that version of criticism that is the tearing down. The Twitter criticism, right? The Facebook criticism, the, you know, to a lesser degree, Instagram criticism, right? All that stuff. I don't have anything against social media. I'm a creature of social media, right? But I do recognize where work is and where work isn't. Generally speaking, work is where results are, and work isn't where results aren't. And so I like to deal in very concrete things when it comes to criticism. I like people who are informed. I like people who read. I like people who build cases. I don't mind long threads of text. I'm into that. That feels like work to me. It takes work to get it. It takes work to create it. Somewhere in there, someone's going to make a decision to do something physical. That's an act. That's work. That's the kind of criticism that I want, right? So I want to talk about the writing in the specific a little more. I don't think I'm going to need this now. So for several years, about 4 years, I was writing locally for Columbus Alive. I was doing a weekly column. It started like kind of bi-weekly, then it turned weekly. They found some pennies in the couch or something. I don't know what happened. And sometimes that article would be like, oh, I saw a movie, maybe there's a social commentary here, blah, blah, blah. The very first column I wrote was like about the movie Halloween, right? And, but then not too long after that, the articles got more pointed. I took the platform very seriously. To have a voice on a platform like that reaches thousands of people where you live is a big deal. Like, it didn't pay a big deal, but it's a big deal, right? Like, you can affect change in your corner of the world, which is how all change really kind of happens, right? Very little change happens at the national or the international level, and then it affects everybody at the same time, all the ways that it affects people, right? Most change occurs in pockets, in cells, in these little places where we live. We make our corner better, and we hope that the corner next to us sees that and makes their corner better. And then maybe you have a better block, you have a better neighborhood, you have a better city, you have a better arts district, you have a better government, and so on and so on and so on, right? That's how the work looks, right? If you're lucky, you might do something larger than that, but most of the work happens on that level, that very next to you level. I go to my job. I try to make that better. I try to make the people that I help better, that kind of thing, right? And so my writing for Columbus Alive during that span of time was really, it got very critical, to say the least. Because I've been in Columbus all my life. I've been Black even longer. I had issues. I had issues with Columbus on those levels, right? I was like, yo, the cops are tripping. The schools are not great. The government is acting a fool. City Hall is not doing what I wanted to do. None of this seems to be working in my favor. And so I would, when it occurred to me to do so, I would write a column about that. Columbus Alive, to their credit, they never told me what to write, and they never told me I couldn't write a thing that I submitted. So that was the deal walking in the door, right? I said, well, because they asked me, I wasn't looking for the job. And they said, hey, we want you to come write. And I said, what do you want me to write? They said, whatever you want. And I said, you don't mean that. He was like, no, I assure you, we mean that. I said, well, we'll see. And so there was a trial period. On my part, there was a trial period. I was like, well, let's see if they'll do this. Let's see if they'll put this out. Let's see if, who's reading it this week, that kind of thing. And to their credit, they accepted every one because they understood that it was work. It was my activism. It was part of my activism, I should say. And so I would write about the mayor and City Hall and the police, and I would do that over and over again until the message stuck. And I would do that unapologetically. And I wouldn't really worry about comments or trolls or any, because I don't even read my own comments. So I was just like, whatever. I wrote it. I said what I said. Just tell me when it's wrong. Didn't happen. Because I'm not wrong. So, but it was important to me. Here's the thing to point out. Because, okay, admittedly, every once in a while, I would look at a comment or something would make its way to me. And somebody would invariably say, if you don't like it here, you should move. At these prices? I've been here all my life. I've paid taxes at every job I've ever had. I'm not going nowhere. You're going to fix this. And I'm going to tell you how to fix it. You'll either do it or you won't. That's up to you. But I'm going to tell you what I need, what I want, what is just, what is right. Whether or not you, as a city, decide to do right by me is up to you. But the whole city saw what I said. Now you do what you want with that. Mayor, city council, police, school board, whoever. And so that's my reputation, right? My reputation isn't largely, well, Scott really has great syntax. Scott is a grammar fool. Like, that is not the reputation, right? The reputation is that if you have my attention, that's either a good thing or a very bad thing. And that's great. I like that job a lot, right? I get to keep people on their toes. That's not a bad job to have. I like writing something and knowing that people at City Hall read it, right? And they know that y'all read it. And based on the stats, a lot of y'all read it. They pay attention to those things. That's important. That's work. That's the writing. I will tell you, because most of us probably know that Columbus Alive recently went away, right? Journalism is hard in this day and age, it's to say the least. But I got picked up by Columbus Monthly, so now I'm doing that for them. And again, we'll see, right? Slightly different audience, right? But the same work, right? I think I've written maybe like 3 or 4 columns for them at this point. And so, I started with a softball. And then I was like, maybe 2, 3 columns in, I was like, okay, let's get to the hard stuff. And so I hit them with the hard stuff, and they were like, let's go. Because they get it. They want to be part of the work, at least once a week, right? So that is criticism in the way that, it's a very direct criticism. I want to talk to you about a slightly indirect version of that. That's the other thing. It's my cultural curation. It's the work that I do with Streetlight Guild. It was mentioned at the top, but I'll mention it again. I'll explain it a little bit. Streetlight Guild is a venue. It's an actual building on Main Street, and we do art exhibits, concerts, poetry readings, whatever it occurs to me to do. The mission of Streetlight Guild is to create and curate and preserve Columbus-based culture. I'm very into Columbus, right? I love this, and this is something that bears pointing out, is that I actually love Columbus. That doesn't always come through to some people, but I promise you, no one spends the amount of words and energy that I do in those columns if you don't love it. I mean, you can do that, but that's a jerk. I'm not a jerk. I'm a city son. And so I speak to my city as a lover. Anyhow, Streetlight Guild. The reason why I created Streetlight Guild was because I saw a deficit culturally in the city. I knew tons of Black artists, tons of Black musicians, tons of Black poets, everybody. And 6 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, you couldn't find them. You couldn't see them. They weren't getting shows. They weren't in the museum. They weren't getting asked to play at the right venues. The festivals were kind of hit or miss. And I was like, this, first of all, that's wrong. Second of all, let us pretend as if the city is unaware of these people. Let us pretend that that's the case. And so even before Streetlight Guild, I did a whole month series of shows called Holler. This was in 2017. Every day that month, I put on a different Black creative person doing a thing. Music, art, dance, theatrical readings, poets. Every day, 31 days. We did it in 11 venues around the city. We were at the Art Museum, right? And so I wanted to remove the excuse. That's really my thing, is I want to remove questions. Where are the Black artists? Well, here they are. All right, here's your Rolodex. Here's, 31 of them, right? No days off. I went to every show except one because I was performing somewhere else, right? So it was real, and it was like living in the Harlem Renaissance or something, right? The real one. And so that proved that we were here. Now I needed to then prove that we could thrive and survive and feed ourselves. Because that's kind of the goal of most artists, is to feed yourself, right? And so I created Streetlight Guild. A couple of years after that, we opened doors. And so that's the business of Streetlight Guild, is to maintain that, right? And we had that focus on that Columbus artist, and we had that focus on underrepresented voices. It's not exclusive. I'll put a white artist on occasionally. But that's the focus. And that is a criticism of a sort too, right? But it's not me saying, hey, Columbus, you ain't gonna hire no black people. Like that's apparent, but that's not necessary to say. I don't have to say that. I just go do something else. And what happened is that we changed the landscape. Once a system that is used to doing things a certain way sees something happening independent of it, something that it should be doing, something that it wants to do, something that it would like to do. Once it sees that happening over here, it will shift. It will come for it. It will come to you. And that's what happened. And so now, and this was only within like the last 6 years, right? Now, black people are everywhere. Let's be clear. You got more work to do. But the criticism has changed, right? I was critical of the structure. I did a thing that made the structure understand that criticism. And so now we have some change. Some change. Artists are in a museum. We're programming in a museum. We are doing the festivals in larger numbers. We are at galleries. There are more galleries. We are running galleries. We are galleries now, right? I got one. Maroon Arts Group got one. We got galleries. So that was real change. But that came from a criticism. I had to step into that. I had to be very clear about what it is I wanted to fix. Once I did that, then the path was clear. So I think the last thing I want to say, I think I have time. I'm not really keeping track of it. I'm so sorry. So I want to talk about how critical can get in the way. There's a bad way to do this. I think we all know that. It's kind of why we don't want to do it more often, right? You get critical, you keep doing that, then you become that person. You know, you're that guy. Oh, here comes that guy. There's a guy locally whom I love. He rails almost daily against the city. His name is Joe Motil. Look, some of you are shaking your heads like, oh yeah, that guy. And Joe does it so that you don't have to. And that's the problem. That's the problem. A lot of people see him as that guy. And it should be us. I'm not talking about just sharing what we write or what we create and liking what we write and what we create. We appreciate that. It makes us look good. But I would love it if you hit a like button and then wrote your own thing, said your own thing, created your own thing in line so that we could combine that stuff and that be the criticism. I like being critical, like it's in my blood. A productive critical, let's be clear. I want a criticism with results, which is why I always reserve the right to stay critical. Your job does something, they make a change, they say, look at what we did in the interest of this previous criticism. Yeah, I'm still gonna be critical. I'm gonna stay on top of this, right? Always stay critical. Don't ever let them stop letting you be critical. Don't let the people who are that guy be out there by themselves. We live in a critical time. The more of us that lean into that and beat that fear down, the better, right? I don't know, that feels pretty good to me. Thank you.